How to talk to rabid Trump haters, the 10 commandments of propaganda, and you'll never guess how long James Clapper has had national security clearance. Plus, we deconstruct the propaganda of CNN's media analysis show, Reliable Sources. You're listening to the Propaganda Report. I'm Brad Binkley here with Monica Perez. Monica, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Brad?
I'm good. I'm recovering from all the treason accusations, the traitor accusations, and just looking to see what they have for us next.
Against us personally? Because
Well, I
our last
mean,
WSB
I'm
show was a
sure
little rough.
probably a few people, yeah.
Poor Ed was screaming his head off that we were taking the side of the enemy.
I want I wanted to make, I don't make or draw comics, but I thought it would be a funny comic to have Rand Paul on the ground surrounded by an angry mob that's kicking and stomping him. And the little caption is Rand Paul from the ground as he's getting beaten is shouting, I think it's good that we don't go to war with Russia. And then all the people who are stomping on him are saying, traitor, treason.
Yeah, and the caption could be, what to do to a tyrant.
Yeah, a tyrant. You gotta be a tyrant also.
Get the tyrant. Well, I've been thinking about how if Russia really is, I was listening to a podcast, I think 21st Century Wire, saying things about Russia doing very well economically and really getting out from under the yoke of what Yeltsin and Clinton and stuff did to them. And Putin does what he says. He brought the debt down. He's husbanding the currency, although they had to devalue because of the worldwide oil price, all this kind of stuff. And the more he was talking and the more I was reflecting on having been in Russia recently and how the difference between this year and 10 years ago, I thought when I read about the 20th century, the First World War and the Second World War, what is happening in Russia, I mean, the Atlanticist powers would not tolerate that. Like, they would kill those people for doing that, really, is my conclusion. I know that sounds harsh, but I feel like World War I and World War II, by extension, were more about stopping Germany and Russia from dominating that Eurasian continent. And if that's where we're headed, I really am afraid that we might be headed for a war with Russia. Like, really, I think if that's the only answer, I don't think these guys are going to take second place or even share the stage for with laying down.
If we go back to the Chatham House and Sir Andrew Wood and the Russian challenge and the papers and the panel discussions they've been having for the past, at least since like 2010, they have, at least Sir Andrew Wood seems to have come to the conclusion that some sort of conflict is the only way to remove Putin from power and install.
He says that.
He actually says that,
Yes,
and he's known as the guy
who
likes to break up countries.
He chuckles at his own. He's
self-proclaimed.
Likes to break up countries, and
Right.
Russia is quite a mother to break up.
So I would agree with your assessment there. He actually, I saw he's been commentating in the news lately about, Trump and Putin's relationship, and I'm like, how can you have this guy as a commentator, as a pundit? That's like, this is not an unbiased person.
Well, what they did in England, they actually had a lot of people at the top who looked like they were resisting war with Germany. So it looked like there's this internal struggle. It did not look like there's this united front. A very high level decision had been taken to not allow this emergence of economic rivals, that they actually make it look like somebody that that's a real process going on, and that war, when it does come, is inevitable. We resisted it. But I have a question for you.
Go for it.
What do you think World War III, if this is what, looking at what's happening today, the conflicts that are happening today, from Israel, I think was in the news recently for bombing Gaza, I guess, and all the stuff about Russia. So those are the two hotspots for all three wars, was the Middle East and that kind of German-Russian frontier. I think that's right. What do you see World War III looking like? Is it nuclear? Are civilians dying? Are soldiers dying? Is it drone? Is it like not? We don't even. It's not even on the TV. Like, what does it look like?
I think it's probably going to be a combination, hybrid warfare. I don't know. I'm sure there will be probably troops in some countries. I don't know where. I think the cyber aspect of it is going to play a major role in it. I think it's going to be a real transformation of warfare. They've just talked too much about cyber warfare over the past couple of years
Oh,
for
yeah.
World War III not to be a major pillar of World War III.
I was reading a press conference or a seminar, I think it was, of a Russian general from years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago or more, where the guy was saying, "Oh, the battlefields of the future are going to have robots that can jump, like run," which I've seen. I've
Or
seen
hold
videos of
doors open like the one from Boston
have
Dynamics.
sex with 2 people at
Yeah,
once.
that one
Like,
also.
that
That's
was the three-way headline you sent me repeatedly, and the dirty
Alexa.
pictures that came along.
There was an article about not to go on too far of a detour, but there
I
was an
knew that
article
topic.
recently about how soon people will be able to have sex with Alexa because it's going to be integrated into sex dolls. Just what everybody's wanted.
Wow. Well, you send me these articles, you text them to me, and I guess unbeknownst to you, they have pictures
I
of
had
like
no
naked
idea.
women. She
Yes,
did that like twice in a
I
row.
sent Monica an article that it was about the story was about a former Playboy model who apparently got into a quote unquote steamy sexual relationship with Goosifer 2.0. I don't know how it's
Guccifer.
steamy because she
Yeah.
had never met him in person. It was all online, yet it was a steamy relationship. I guess the steamy aspect was that she sent him a topless photo. And I was looking at it on my phone and there's no provocative cover photo on the link at all. And this was like a regular this was a Rupert Murdoch owned newspaper or magazine or whatever that regularly has articles that I think Trump even did an interview at recently. And I sent Monica the link. And then when I look at the thing on my phone, it showed a picture. They had the topless picture of the Playboy model in the cover photo.
Yeah,
I was
like I
shocked.
sit there at dinner with my children and my husband, and sometimes I have the phone up in case one of my kids is out at soccer. And this picture pops up and it was huge. It was a noticeable.
I was
shocking.
shocked.
It was shocking.
It goes to the vulgarity stuff that you've been talking a lot about. I was so shocked by that. I was like, we used to have to sneak into my friend's dad's room and find his Playboys to see these kind of pictures when I was a kid. Nowadays, it's probably going to be on CNN tomorrow.
Well, I'll tell you, the more I think about it, when we report on Google having 40,000 YouTube censors, and I see my kid with Down syndrome, I have no wanting YouTube. He's addicted to YouTube. I have absolutely no way to refine the screening, the censor. I want to make sure he's not getting too much of violence, too much vulgarity. And I guess the on off switch of safety is just simply porn, because he has these guys who comment on dumb kids' cartoons using nothing but vulgarity. I really don't get it. I do
That's
not
how you
get it.
become a YouTube star is you target children and you do weird puppets or you just swear all the time.
All the time. It's nothing but swearing. My other kids get worried about my son who has Down syndrome. Like, Mom, he can't listen to that anymore. But unless I sit there with him, and I like to give him an hour on YouTube, I can do the laundry, whatever. There's no way around it. I'm just saying they have 40,000 censors. I don't need them censoring out political nuances. They censored me out for criticizing Sheriff Israel. You know what I mean? They're not censoring ISIS out, right? ISIS is still all over the place. But I don't get I'm the one who's censored. So that's what they're using it for, to cut to cut it so broadly that I'm not even allowed on it. But every possible other thing.
Yeah, every pedophile with a puppet.
Yeah. Everything. There is no censorship. And I don't want censorship like they censor it. I want them to just give me buttons.
Yeah. Another thing that kids are targeted with that I have found they uncritically accept because, you know, they're children, their brains haven't developed the critical faculties yet, is the videos about like top 10 most shocking things you didn't know about blank, about some topic, whether it's aliens or whatever. I've had
SpongeBob.
yeah, SpongeBob. Yeah, there you go. I've had my nieces or my nephews and my friends' sons repeating these things
Yes.
verbatim, and I'm like, wait a minute, you know, slow down. And the stuff they're saying is they're getting just complete misinformation and lies. But you know, because these clickbait headlines are targeting children who don't
Yes,
know how to analyze this stuff, it manipulates.
Yes, my son would no longer watch SpongeBob. And I asked him why, and he said, because it's so dark. He said, I think I told you this, that Squidward is suicidal. And I said, why? What makes you think Squidward is suicidal? And he said, it says it right there on the blurb. And in his mind, I think the way it was explained to me, it was like on the TV, like the TiVo said Squidward suicidal, but it wasn't. It was a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And he watches that stuff all the time, and blind reactions, which is very full of cursing, I think.
The reaction ones is just somebody screaming in outrage or in shock and swearing. Those are reaction videos to children, and children just laugh every time somebody swears.
Absolutely.
All right. I wanted to address briefly something that you know a little bit about, that you're good at, is how to talk to rabid Trump haters. And after the show on Saturday, my friend called me and he was getting ambushed. He is a libertarian. He's not like, you know, he's more, he has more conspiratorial beliefs. He believes that it's, you know, kind of similar beliefs as you or I, you know, powers up top are controlling everything. There's not really two sides. You know, there might be two sides ideologically, but those in power just kind of manipulate the ideologies for their own purposes.
Does he think those people in power are lizards?
No, I don't think he goes with the David Icke philosophy. I have no idea, but I don't think he goes down that far. Actually, I know he doesn't because he hasn't been able to watch. He always falls asleep when he tries to watch those. He told me so. I guess not. But anyway, he likes Rand Paul. And he's getting ambushed by all these people. He does theater. He's getting ambushed by these people calling Rand Paul, oh, your boy's a traitor. He's he's committing treason. And he's getting sent these text messages, and people are making comments to him because he's like the only person in the circle that he's around sometimes who doesn't just rabidly hate Trump. So whenever they want to, you know, slam somebody who they perceive as the enemy, they go to him. You know, like he's the only one in the circle. So
he gets targeted. That has happened to me.
Right.
It's so annoying because they're looking for a fight.
Right. That's exactly what they're doing. And he's like,
I mean, they attack you personally, and always in a crowd of people who agree with them.
Exactly. They didn't use any evidence in their accusation about Rand Paul. They just shouted things at him, basically. He would tell me things that we had played, like George Lakoff telling people to say. So I'm like, I know exactly where they got it. They're just repeating things that they're being told. There's no critical thinking going on at all in this conversation. So I was thinking about this, and when talking to people, you know, obviously you want to do it if you can, a one-on-one setting. It's going to be the best way to do it. But you have to think about the frame of mind that the people you're talking to come in with. And because of a lot of the propaganda and a lot of the outrage that has been stirred up, people come into these conversations not to have a conversation, not to use critical thought, not to use reason. They come into it simply to win, to shut you down, and to shout their points at you, the points that they've been given through the propaganda. So their goal is not in any way to have a conversation or develop new ideas or potentially change their view on something. Their goal is only to shut you down and only to shout you down. It is to win. And your goal, or his goal, I said, your goal isn't to do that. You're not trying to win. You're trying to have a conversation. You're trying to, you know, show them here are some ways that people are deceiving you. And you have to understand the difference in the mindset there. One person's coming into a fight. The other one's coming in trying to reveal something. So you have to get them out of that mind frame. if we react the same way that everybody else reacts to their outrage and their shouting, then we're going to get the same reaction that everybody else gets. So we have to react in a different way, which you do a good job of on the radio. Lenin and actually Saul Alinsky talks a lot about this, about the importance of making absolutely everything political. Because if you make everything political, if every issue that everybody talks and thinks about is made into politics, then every issue is potentially divisive and polarizing, and every single issue can be used to divide and conquer the public. So that's why they want to make everything political all the time. In order to have these conversations, you have to enter it from a different angle. You have to somehow make it non-political. It's not a fight. It's not about who's trying to win. You have to make this a non-political thing. It's not about, left or right or whatever. This is about, let's talk about some deception tactics, mass communication tactics that have been used, or, since the beginning of time, whether you're pointing it out in a commercial, in some other, context that isn't political in nature. I just think that's something to think about, is how to have these conversations in a way that makes them not political, because when they aren't political, those outrage triggers aren't ready to go off in the person that you're talking to, and they're more receptive to having conversations and more open-minded, because they're not thinking about winning. They're not thinking about shutting you down.
I just wrote down like a million things. I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a lot of reactions.
Yeah.
I'm going to go backwards. One is from the last thing you said, making things all political. I have absolutely noticed that, to the point where this was never true. And I've always, when I grew up in New York, my family, they weren't Republican. They weren't called libertarian then, but we were traditional conservatives. My parents voted for Barry Goldwater, I think. He might not have been conservative enough for them. They liked Pat Buchanan until Pat Buchanan didn't want free trade or immigration. My parents were really libertarians. That did not make us popular in New York, but it never really came up. Like, people didn't come over and pick fights with my parents like that. I mean, maybe they gravitated towards like-minded people. I don't know. But now I noticed that when when we were talking about, like, people are picking fights with you when they're with other people who agree with them. The two people I was thinking about are my friends.
Yeah.
They're actual friends. And it gets to the point where I just don't even want to deal with them. Like, I'm like, you know what? I can't.
Right.
I don't want to hang out with you because I know
feels.
You're going to say, how's your boy Trump? And it's like, it's not my boy.
That's exactly what they say to my friend.
And I'm like, I'm not even a Trump supporter. And of course, the Trump supporters know I'm not a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not a hater, but I just, whatever. I can't, I'm outside that dialectic. I can't get back in it. It's not possible. My mother, she said, oh, I noticed last week you weren't so tough on Trump like you normally are. I said, I was just thought he did a good job in talking to Putin. Like, I mean, I always tell you what I think specifically about the issue. I do have an overview. I think everybody's kind of like an actor, including him. But so when so one of my friends is super, I mean, like, ridiculously, like, so far left. It's not even ideological. You know what I mean? It's just political left. So something came up about Bill Cosby, and I'm actually still expecting people to be from the old left, where we should agree on this, which is, my point was, the Sixth Amendment is too important. The Sixth Amendment is really important, and stuff like this, where we violate it, is bad. Her answer was, and I quote, Bill Cosby is an idiot. And I was like, I mean, that was her answer. And I was like, how can you not care about the Sixth Amendment? You know what I mean? Like, I just don't, I don't understand. It's just this knee-jerk thing. It just comes from this bucket of stuff that you're supposed to regurgitate. It doesn't even make sense anymore. War with Russia is not something Democrats should be promoting.
Yeah.
These
immediate things that they put in people's face, it undermines our ability to use abstract thinking, which is required to defend the Constitution.
So I think I'm figuring out what the problem is. So the fact that it's all political and totally a deal breaker is that in the old days, you could actually discuss the ideology. And you could discuss it, and you would actually always both agree on the Sixth Amendment. You would always agree on that. I mean, that's the beauty of it, is that really it would just come down to what does the welfare clause mean in the Constitution. But everybody kind of supported the Bill of Rights. Now people will totally abandon the Bill of Rights, left and right, on an issue by issue basis.
If they can beat the other side by doing so.
Yeah, and Muslims are terrorists. Like you just have to. You don't understand. Things aren't the way they were when the founders established this country, or we've progressed past those basic human rights. So that's one thing I in response to what you were thinking. I absolutely learned from a great producer I had. It completely changed my experience on the air. You get what you give.
Yeah.
You get what you give. And you're telling me that they are deliberately giving me emo and hostility and all that. And I just let it dissipate. I don't buy into it because she told me that, and it made my life so much better. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they always just blow themselves up. I mean, always.
Say that again. My headphones fell off.
Sorry. They always blow themselves up. Always.
Oh, yeah, they definitely do. They don't know what to say when you ask them questions like that because they're so used to getting the exact same reaction, which is going to be the counter narrative, the talking points of the other side shouted to them, that when someone reacts in a different way or asks them questions, it short circuits them. Yeah,
like the guy was saying, like, you Trump supporters, like, I'm not a Trump supporter. Fury did 9/11. Like, whatever.
Yeah, he had no idea. He just started making things up at that.
I feel bad for him because he cares. He cares, and he could not hear me. I was like, don't blow up Syria.
I could feel his blood pressure rising. It's crazy.
He really cares. And I'm like, don't blow up Syria. He's like, what about 9/11? I'm like, yes, Saudi Arabia did 9/11, and they're on our side in the Syria thing. Like, you're making no sense. And anyway.
Yeah.
So my original, when you first started this idea, what do you do there? My very first basics for arguing is get your principles straight. And for me, it's very simple. Don't steal or don't kill, and don't kill. Don't touch me or my stuff. It's very simple. So you could deconstruct or drill down to any argument on any issue and say, look, my agents are not allowed to steal or kill. So without justification. So we have to talk about that. And then you need to just make sure you know the facts you're talking about.
Yeah.
So when Rand Paul says Russia has interfered in fewer elections than the United States has, I don't know that he's right about that. He did mention the name of his source and the report they did. So it would take 1 second for you to verify those facts. And then you can talk about your principles, your facts. And then I would say the next level is you clarify what it is that's going on there. So what I've done on Twitter a lot is say, are we... First, 2 questions. Are we arguing ideology or are we arguing facts? Because if we're arguing facts, we need to just stop down and verify the facts, or conclude that we can't verify the facts, or dismiss the facts, disprove the facts. So we can't ever get anywhere. We don't know what to do here with Syria and Saudi Arabia and whatever. So I would say the default position is don't kill anybody until you can verify the facts. And if it's ideology that you're arguing, what's your goal here? Is your goal to change my ideology, or is it to understand my ideology in case it's better than yours?
Exactly.
Or are you just an asshole? Right. I don't say, are you just an asshole? But when they can't answer that question, like, what are you after? Changing my ideology or changing your own? In which case, neither is happening on Twitter, you know? And you have to find out what they're after, and they will, I think at that moment, a thought will pop into their minds that they will then dismiss immediately and bury as hard as they can, which is, no, I just want to fuck with you because I hate you. You know what I mean? Like, I hate Trump and I hate Trump people. And I know I can get away with it with you because you're like nice, or I know you, or you're outnumbered, or whatever. So
any response to disagreement or to questioning doesn't come with a well-reasoned, it's not a well-reasoned argument that they respond with. It's ad hominem attacks is what they respond with.
Oh, I get that all the time. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a job. Like, I'm an idiot.
Nazi. All right.
Yeah, Nazi is even more than I normally get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nazi actually said, like, well, I'm not a Nazi because, but you're an idiot. I'm like, well, I'm actually not an idiot. I could be wrong and maybe even bad, but you can tell I'm not an idiot. Maybe I'm being an idiot about this issue, but what issue are you talking about? This is after the show. So I've had a 3-hour show. Someone's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I can trace my steps.
Well, it's what that does, and we know this logically, but because ad hominem attacks feel personal, we react to them. It's challenging not to react to them, and that's why they work. I told my friend, because he was describing the conversation he had, and the person he was talking to made an assertion without evidence, and then my friend said, well, who's your source on that? And then the person he was talking to, I can't remember what the specific assertion was, when he was asked about the evidence, he just started saying, what are you siding with Russia? He started making ad hominem attacks. And that made my friend get defensive, just as it would make anyone get defensive, because it feels like when someone raises their voice and starts shouting things at you, it feels like you're being attacked. Your body reacts physically as though it's being attacked. So you start to get defensive. And what that does is it effectively diverts from the most important question. And the only thing that matters for the rest of the conversation is, what is your source for that claim that you just made? Until you tell me a source, we have no reason to continue talking, because you have not proven or given any evidence to what you just said.
They will say at that point, because I faced it, you're hopeless. Like, I think there's a new field, epigenetics. It makes it very clear, which it should already be clear, that Darwinism is too simplistic. You can't have randomness it's just, there isn't enough time in eternity for randomness. I hope maybe people won't like this, but epigenetics is an emerging field that shows that there's more to kind of subcellular activity than just mutations that benefit a species and change it forever, and ones that kill it off. So, but I said that to a guy, a very adamant, actually communist, like he actually likes Mao. And I said that, and he said, you can't start questioning science. I mean, then you're really just gone. You're hopeless. You can't. That's just puts you outside the realm of discourse.
Yeah.
Nothing does that. Flat Earth Mark is not outside the realm of discourse.
I agree.
Lizard people, it's not outside the realm of discourse. Always refute, never dismiss.
Right. And to what you were just saying there, I told my friend, I said, as best you can, learn to, it's hard, try to let those ad hominem attacks bounce off you and stay laser focused on that most important question. What is your source of the claim you just made? Because until that is given, and until it is proven to where both of you agree that it is acceptable, then there's no reason to move on. There's no reason to move on in the conversation. So stay laser focused on that. In my opinion, and I told him to do this, I said, because I know this person he was talking to. I don't know if this would work with everybody, but I said, I know so-and-so. And to be honest with you, it disappoints me, because I never expected him to be the type of person who, when there's a group of people and there's one person who's being shamed and kind of bullied by everybody else, I never expected him to be the type of person who was going to jump in with the mindless mob and stomp on the one person who's by himself. I always expected him to be the kind of person who would actually stand up for that small minority, even if he didn't agree with them, and stand up for their right to speak. That's who I thought he was. So it's really disappointing that he's actually jumping in to stomp on the minority. And
you know how hard that is in a crowd to do.
Yeah, it is, especially in the moment. He talks to this guy one-on-one quite a bit too.
I have another layer of a suggestion for your friend. If he's laser focused and they get us, they reach a stalemate, you could also direct him to the Putin Wallace interview, where Putin, he has a lot of facts. and stuff that isn't facts, and he just tells Chris Wallace that they're facts. I really, that was my best part. My favorite part was Chris Wallace gives him non-facts, like an indictment is not evidence, whatever. But he also gives him facts, like your missile video shows Florida, and in both cases, Putin just slaps him down, which I loved. But I just thought it was funny because Wallace was trying such juvenile, such unsophisticated tactics to try to get the better Putin. But what Putin did also repeatedly was whenever Wallace wanted to take his facts and make this broader point, Putin would drill down into what is mutually agreeable and underlying issue. Like, don't you believe in democracy? Isn't it democracy we're talking about here? Aren't we talking about innocent lives no matter where they live? Like, what are you talking? You were talking about free markets. Are we not allowed to agree on a fair price for oil? Like the stuff like that.
Yeah.
He just kept drilling down Socratically. And you really have no reason to think that Putin believes in that in his soul, like he has ideology. I would think he does not. I don't know. But when he talks about that stuff, he's schooled in it. He understands the principles of the social democratic ideology, and he holds people in the West to their own standard. That's all he does.
Right.
So you could do that. You could say, okay, what do you want? You want the best for the most people, right? So are you willing to kill some people so the other people can have the best? How do you know? How do you make those judgments? You know what I'm saying? Like, ask the guy what he's after.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Thank you.
You made me think of something, but I forgot it again. I guess I'm
come on.
Leading thoughts again. I think it's important to think about ways to respond to these communications and the way that people react, because we can't react the same way everybody else does.
I want to add a random non-sequitur.
Go for it.
Thank you. One thing I realized, it's like one of those things that I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I had a dream about that. One of the clips from Putin's interview with Wallace that I did not realize the significance of until like I popped awake at 4 a.m. was, he said this thing about, he's like, Wallace asked Putin, you were supposed to be a democratic reformer. What happened to you? And Putin says, what happened to me? And then he rattles off all this awful stuff. He said, what happened to you? What happened to the West? But one of the things he rattled off, I believe, in that answer was how the West applies its own laws, own actual domestic laws, extraterritorially. And I was just thinking that he was talking about sovereign, the sovereignty issue, that we violate people's sovereignty all the time. But he wasn't. I think what he was talking about, and I'm almost certain it's Mueller who did this. Under him, I believe, after 9/11, the FBI started enforcing law internationally. Now, the CIA is the intelligence agency. It is allowed to operate internationally. The FBI is supposed to operate domestically as a federal law enforcement bureau, but they will exercise their authority in other countries. That I've read about. I can't think of an example offhand, although my guess is that there's hundreds of examples if I just stopped and thought about it for a second. But what I do remember distinctly is reading in one of the many articles I read about Mueller that it was he who expanded the scope of the FBI abroad. And I just think it's kind of funny that Putin was taking a shot at him. And I took a lot of shots. I have an outline of all the things Mueller did that were totally illegal and deceptive and damaging and fatal and all that. And I forgot about that one. I didn't think about the significance of it until Putin pointed out. Now, that's a guy who's holding us to our own standards.
Yeah. Putin's probably known Mueller for a long time.
Personally? Oh, because of the uranium?
The uranium and what you just said, the guy's been an international player for the elite for quite some time. And now he's leading the investigation.
Oh, because of Lockerbie. I'm sure Putin was very familiar because Lockerbie was what, in the 90s? Was that Lockerbie airplane bombing?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, the Lockerbie bombing. A plane went down over Scotland. Let me make sure. This is off the top of my head. I believe it was in the 90s. And a Libyan guy was was framed for it, and by Mueller, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a very fishy trial. And after that, Libya agreed to pay like billions in reparations, if I'm not mistaken. And eventually that guy who was dying of cancer in the hospital, he got returned to Libya, which I was outraged, but I don't think he was guilty. And then around that time, Gaddafi said, I'm not paying these reparations anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm kicking Chevron out of the country, something like that. And then he was gone. Then Gaddafi was scalped the next year and Chevron was back, if I'm not mistaken about that. Yeah. But the Lockerbie bombing, the underlying story, and this was something that was alluded to in Time magazine. So this reached the level of mainstream acceptability. There was a guy, I forget his name, I believe he was a DIA guy. I believe he was a Defense Intelligence Agency guy. And he found evidence of the CIA dealing in drugs, cross-border drug transactions, probably to generate black money, whatever, black ops money, or maybe just to cause trouble and control governments. I really don't know. But he had the evidence. And so they brought down the plane. That's called haystacking, when they like kill a lot of people and you don't know who it is they're after.
Yeah.
The last fatality on a plane, besides the Southwest engine failure, which I don't buy as a totally up and up story. The last fatality on a U.S. plane before that was like 7 years ago. 50, 60 people died, and one was a 9/11 activist who had been married to a guy who died in 9/11. So I thought maybe that was an example of haystacking in Buffalo. So it's widely believed that this guy was assassinated in that way. And the FBI, if I recall correctly, I didn't refresh my memory on this, but the FBI had been on the scene, like was first on the scene to the crash, and actually retrieved this like metal fireproof briefcase of the guy who died and took it away before the locals could get their hands on it. And I think Putin was he not named as Yeltsin's number 2 around that time? Or in any case, he was high on in the KGB.
I'm not sure. I do recall him being his number 2, but I don't know the year.
That was like at the very end.
That was back before I was paying close attention to international affairs.
Were you 10 years old? Yeah. So Yeltsin was there till 99, and I believe Putin took over after him. And Lockerbie, 1988 was the bombing. So that was even before. I believe that's when Putin was 100% in the KGB. So he really probably would have been all over that.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the KGB from 75 to 91.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
So he was a lieutenant colonel. That kind of seems not.
They've both been international players for quite some time now. So I'm sure he's
Sorry, are you mad at me? You're going to cut all that out.
No.
You can, though. But yes, so I'm sure he was all the heck over that.
Oh, yeah. Mueller definitely seems to have his foot in a lot of things that are corrupt. All right. I'm going to play you a clip of James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence under Barack Obama. He was on CNN today. He was on a bunch of their shows because the outrage of the day is that Trump threatened to revoke the security clearance from James Clapper and Brennan and a couple of other people who apparently still have security clearance. In the clip, Clapper does a couple of things, in my opinion. One of them is he basically confirms the existence of the deep state. I don't know any other way to interpret what he says. And secondly, he reveals just how long he has had national security clearance. If you had to guess, how long would you say that James Clapper has had national security clearance? Since what year?
Do I have to guess? Because
just ballpark it. See if you can guess.
Because I accidentally have his Wikipedia page in front of me.
Oh, you see it.
I don't see that, but I see that he was the director of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, starting in 91. So I assume.
Well, just give it a guess before you read it.
Okay, I didn't read it. How long has he had security clearance? I'm gonna say 50 years.
Wow.
What this involves is my eligibility for access. which I've had since continuously since September of 1963.
You just said that you've had security clearance since 1963. So what, since John F. Kennedy was president?
Exactly.
So for people not in the intelligence world, people who are not familiar with the way the government works, can you just explain why you and others maintain that clearance even though you have retired from the government?
Well, the rationale, and this is a long-standing practice that goes back decades, that senior formers from these positions are granted continued eligibility for access to classified information. And this is to facilitate consultation with those who are occupying or are the current incumbents. And so I've had occasion to engage with senior members of this administration who, for obvious reasons, will remain nameless, drawing on my, 50 years of experience and my corporate memory and my background on certain issues.
So you help them out. You help out members of the current president's operation, the current president's government.
Yes. I have.
Notice there at the end, she did not want to say the current president's staff. They were very touchy around the way they were talking about that, because to say, so James Clapper, the person who the president says is spreading fake news, who has been caught lying to Congress, basically, you have had private influence over the president's staff. Can you think of the conflict of interest there? Listen to the way that she kind of phrased that question again. She was very touchy throughout that whole interview.
So you help them out. You help out members of the current president's operation, the current president's government.
Yes, I have.
You see, she didn't. She was going to say staff, but she didn't want to, though. Yeah. That is exactly what the deep state is. People who have national security clearance and influence over people in the current administration for decades and decades.
I want to read you a quote that I believe they took down, but it was on the Council of Foreign Relations website. And it's from James Jones, I think is a general, looks like 4-star general, National Security Advisor. It says, thank you for that wonderful tribute to Henry Kissinger yesterday. Congratulations. As the most recent National Security Advisor of the United States, I take my daily orders from Dr. Kissinger, who is not in government, filtered down through General Brent Scowcroft. So this was, I believe, under Obama's watch, filtered down through General Brent Scowcroft and Sandy Berger, who is also here. We have a chain of command in the National Security Council that exists today. This was in 2009. He was the first one of these national security advisors under Obama. And he talks about, Henry Kissinger, right, was under Nixon, they clearly, and this Clapper he was deep into intel during Vietnam.
Give me a break. He is a CNN. He's an employee of CNN. He's a paid pundit. Not only him, though. Phil Mudd, Hayden. There's always somebody on their panel who is a former CIA agent every single night. This is Operation Mockingbird. And I've said this before. This is Operation Mockingbird, where the intelligence agencies collude with the mainstream media to spread propaganda. This is in plain sight. And this is exactly like the Pentagon program that was, I believe, in 2001, where they put former intelligence assets in all of the mainstream media outlets to spread specifically scripted talking points that promoted to the public the existence of weapons of mass destruction. And they knew that they were spreading propaganda. This was exposed by the New York Times, actually, a few years later. This is no different than that. This is the CIA running CNN.
Yeah, and John Miller was the head of FBI, I think, public relations, and he was the guy who had all the exclusives for the Boston Marathon bombing for CBS, and then that's why, the Chris Cuomo thing makes me crazy. All right, maybe he's not CIA, but his family is clearly about power in government, and he's there to propagandize us.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that John Miller guy. That was really interesting once I learned more about him. So
yeah, and people take it seriously. That's the thing. They look at it, and yes, you'll hear CNN say the state-controlled media, the state-run media of Russia, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, what are you?
it's unbelievable. They have CIA, FBI, former quote unquote intelligence agents on every single night. Probably most of them still have national security clearance. There's no telling what they're revealing that they shouldn't be. And if they do have opposing or a conflict with the current administration, they have the power to be subversive. I mean, it blows my mind that these people are allowed to have access to classified information, regardless of who's in office.
And what about the anonymous sources? The anonymous sources
Right.
pump all that stuff out. Yeah, but that is the very definition of the deep state. And some people defend it because they say, like at Comey, we have a deep culture, not a deep state.
I know.
That there has to be
How
continuity.
stupid do you think we are, Comey?
See, but here's the thing. Our system, whether it is possible or impossible for the American experiment to work, I think it's possible. And I think it was working in the 19th century. But what it is set up to not have all this stuff. So what they're saying is you can't have elected officials and transparency when you're running an empire. It's like, yes, I know. I know that. We're not supposed to be running an empire. Well, Russia and China would take over the world. It's like, not really. What would actually happen is what was happening in the 19th centuries. We were taking over the world. We were setting not by actually physically invading other countries, but by setting an example and by absorbing all the world's resources through sheer peace and prosperity. And everyone else would follow suit. And you can have open borders then because other countries will simply have to follow that path, which is why these people are so hell-bent on every single country adopting the same rules. So there's no way to demonstrate that an alternative of true freedom could work. That's what Russia was promised, was that it was going to be shown true freedom by these free market economists from Harvard and stuff. And they were really just carved up and distributed to oligarchs, ready-made monopolies given away. And it's complicated, but basically given away for a song. And it changed Russia for all that time. And I think Putin's probably correcting that a little bit, although he's backed by a lot of these guys.
Yeah. And to make it work, or to continue to fight for it, we have to improve our ability collectively to recognize propaganda and to be able to overcome our own bias, our own emotional, it's easy to get emotional when we talk about these issues. We have to be able to recognize that and regulate those emotions and ask questions in order to fight for the American experiment. With that said, I want to analyze one of CNN's shows. CNN has a show called Reliable Sources, hosted by Brian Stelter. I talk about it all the time. That show does kind of what we do. They analyze media. They expose propaganda, or he does, Brian Stelter and his guest. So I figured it would be worthwhile to see what they consider media analysis and to see what they consider exposing propaganda. And we can expose their propaganda in the process. But before I play some clips of that, I want to read to you the 10 Commandments of Propaganda. The 10 Commandments of Propaganda is in a book written by a woman named Anne Morelli. What she did was she summarized the contents of another book, which is called Falsehoods in Wartime. It's a great book. Of course, some people who are working probably for the powers that be claim that a lot of the things in this book have been debunked. They haven't. There's no evidence to that claim. The Falsehoods in Wartime book, it lists out all of the made up stories that countries used, that the Allies used during World War I in order to provoke the public into war.
And a lot of that stuff that was used back then is still used today.
Yeah.
Not just the style, but the actual words. So you're trying to argue for non-intervention, whatever, and they always start you, but Nazis.
Right.
However, World War I and its aftermath, you can read some of these books that will blow your mind about how England and bankers on Wall Street deliberately promoted the most internally destructive ideologies they could find to deliver the final blow inside and out to Germany.
Yeah.
That's what this book, Conjuring Hitler, and there are other books like that that really lay it out, that they wanted that. So you can't say, but Nazis. It's like, no, but don't interfere, and that stuff won't take root. That stuff has to be promoted. That's like ISIS and stuff. Where are they getting the money? Where are they getting that? And then you just scratch the surface and you find that our allies do it.
Absolutely. The UK, or the elites in the UK, they've been manipulating us for hundreds of years. I mean, this is on the record. This isn't even in question. That's why it's laughable when one scholar comes out and tries to say that all of the stories that the book Falsehoods in Wartime shows that are false, when this scholar comes out and says, no, there's actually evidence that says that all those are true. It's laughable, because when Edward Bernays and those that worked in the Wellington House in the UK write about how gullible the American people were for buying the fantastic stories that they spun in order to convince us to go to war, you have the people who made up the stories saying they made them up, saying they couldn't believe how gullible we are.
I've had people tell me that thank God they made up those stories.
Right.
Because those people had to be stopped. And it's like, but let's talk about World War I, not World War II.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They get them confused.
People get them confused. Nobody had to be stopped in World War I.
World War I is what created Hitler.
Yes. And it created circumstances for a guy like Hitler to emerge. And then, and of all the alternative styles that Germany could have turned to in their political despair, this one was promoted from the outside. And so, yes, you had to stop it once it was out of control, but getting it out of control was done to excuse going in there and stopping Germany for other reasons. But people will always use that facts are facts, but truth is truth. We can make up facts because we know what the real truth is, and we don't have to waste our time finding real facts. But always, if you have to make stuff up, and I'm talking about, pre-war, the stuff they were making up to get people to start those dominoes falling of true destruction and evil, that if they had to make that stuff up, maybe it wasn't true before.
Exactly.
It was self-fulfilling. They conjured it so that it would justify, but they started talking it up before they actually succeeded in conjuring it.
All right, the 10 commandments of propaganda. Number 1, and this is the people who are propagating for war. They want war, or they want some other end, but I believe this summary is specifically focused on war. Number 1, we do not want war. We're going to read these, and you're going to think of a lot of the things in the media that you hear right now, and also keep them in mind when we play these clips from reliable sources here in a moment. Number 1, we do not want war. Number 2, the opposite party alone is guilty of war. Number 3, the enemy is the face of the devil. Number 4, we defend a noble cause, not our own interest. Number 5, the enemy systematically commits cruelties. Our mishaps are involuntary. Number 6, the enemy uses forbidden weapons like chemicals, I bet. Number 7, we suffer small losses. Those of the enemy are enormous. So that's
my gosh. Yeah. Oh, that was straight out of the Imperial War Museum. They had an entire exhibit of guys speaking, acting like it was the real guys from World War I, saying they used chemical weapons first. We have to do it. We have to stop these monsters. We don't want to use chemical weapons, but we have to do it because they're doing it. I mean, over and over again. I literally felt like I was in Clockwork Orange, I had to get out of that pod. But it was the only place with a chair, and I just had to sit down for a second. I was tired, and it was like bombarding me with that, and I was like, you're using chemical weapons, just let it go.
You're gonna love number 8.
Oh no.
Number 8, artists and intellectuals back our cause.
Thank God.
Number 9, our cause is sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And number 10, and maybe my favorite, all who doubt our propaganda are traitors.
You're a Democrat or you're evil.
Yep. All right.
Number 1. I have to go back to number 1.
Go back. Get to.
That's Trump's purpose, whether he knows it or not. Read it again.
We do not want war.
Right. So Trump obviously doesn't want war with Russia. He's in bed with Russia. Trump doesn't want war. What better an excuse? What better, more plausible a denial of wanting war than Trump's relationship with Putin?
You make a good point. Okay, so this is the intro of. I'm playing you the intro of Reliable Sources because this is how he frames his show. Every single show, this is how he opens. So this is what the show is supposed to be about.
Shock and awe, Trump style. I'm Brian Stelter, and this is Reliable Sources, our weekly look at the story behind the story, of how the media really works and how the news gets made.
Story behind the story, how the media really works, how the news gets made. He's, peeling behind the curtain, showing us how the news really works. Now, this is his opening monologue, which I want to do a screen share because I want you to look at the screen text and the images that come on screen occasionally. And if you're listening to this on podcast, I will put this one on YouTube so you can see these ridiculous screen text and screen images that they're using. This is his opening monologue where he's introducing what the show is going to be about. It's about 2 minutes long. I cut it up a little bit. It might be a little bit off with what you're watching on the screen because I'm doing it kind of a ghetto way here.
Fine. I understand. Yeah. All right. Hold on. Who's this guy?
This is Brian Stelter. This is the host of the show.
That guy is. I am genuine in saying I never watch this stuff. I only get my left-wing news from you, Binkley.
Well, you're about to see something special here then.
All right. So this is Brian Stelter.
Yeah.
Covering the mystery of the Trump-Putin meeting.
You ready?
Yes.
Trump's odd behavior with Vladimir Putin is compelling so many people to ask, what does Putin have on Trump? Has Trump been compromised? All of those people, those experts, those reporters, they are looking at the fact pattern and they're seeing something strange, even sinister.
No rational president would act this way if he weren't being blackmailed on some level.
You can't just dismiss this the idea that Putin has something on Trump.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but his behavior is so pervasively bizarre and against the national interest that it certainly raises the possibility that something untoward is going on.
I want to stop it there because I do want to point out that he said experts and journalists are asking, and it even says on the screen title there, experts are asking, has Trump been compromised? Did you notice who those experts were? He just played audio clips. One of them was Joe Scarborough.
Yes.
The other is an Anderson Cooper CNN panel with Bernstein and this other clown. These are just friendlies from CNN and MSNBC that he's using as an example of the experts.
The compromat thing, Chris Wallace actually said to Putin, and that wasn't the first time that came up. That's a theme that I believe, or a meme that was established before the meeting. Like you were saying, the treason stuff, all that.
Yeah.
It was all before the meeting. And these guys are saying that no one would act that way. It's bizarre. He's clearly pervasively bizarre. He's clearly being blackmailed against the national interest. He didn't act bizarrely. He acted like a statesman.
I know.
He did not act bizarrely. And it's why should he? Why would it be Russia? Why would it be Russia? Why would it be Russia? And Putin made a good point too. And you made a good point, which is if Putin wanted to sway the election, he would have said, I'm for Hillary. I just gave her $10 billion.
That's all he had to do if he wanted to sway the election in favor of Trump. You're right. I mean, that's all he had to do. Why would he go to such elaborate means?
And not be effective?
Now, the argument would be, and I think this is a better argument, there's always international propaganda, by the way. It's not false to say that. We've been saying that for 2 years. To not talk about that is to ignore historical context. Every country that has the resources to, tries to interfere.
They try to influence just like everybody tries to influence. So you're going to watch RT if they have a strong preference. And I don't think they would have had a strong preference between Trump and Hillary. There's no reason to. I don't think Trump is going to do anything in their favor. He wants to blow up the Germany gas deal. That's all that anyone cares about. And he's not on Russia's side. So I do think that Trump's role is to prove the number one rule of propaganda, which is we don't want war.
Yeah.
We do.
I would say that a better argument than Putin was supporting Trump, because there was a lot easier ways for him to support Trump, is the trying to sow discord among the country. But that's what our government or what our media does all the time.
That is such a classic example of them saying, pointing out a phenomenon that's happening that they are responsible for and blaming the other guy.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
See, these concerns are now in the bloodstream in a whole new way. I don't think there's any coming back from this. Josh Marshall of the Liberal Talking Points memo put it this way. He said the press conference in Helsinki made cautious, prominent people start to come to grips with the reality that Trump is under some kind of influence or control by a foreign adversary. Now, Marshall believes that is true. Others are unsure, but
Wait, can you back that up? It says the Monday press conference made cautious, prominent people start to come to grips with the reality that Donald Trump, as crazy as it sounds and as difficult as it may be to believe, which is the part of the quote that Stelter did not read, is under some kind of influence or control by a foreign adversary power, whether by fear or avarice or some other factor. Josh Marshall? Who's Josh Marshall?
Josh Marshall of the Liberal Talking Points memo put it this way. He said the press conference in Helsinki.
The Liberal Talking Points memo.
That's not what, that's an actual name of something? Sounds like what Stelter gets on his desk every morning. They're actually providing the propaganda. But what are they talking about? Because Putin said, because Trump said, just simply that Trump said he's not sure the intelligence guys are right?
Yes, he's saying that Trump is siding with Putin over our intelligence agencies, and this is such odd behavior that people are questioning whether or not he's been compromised.
I can't even wrap my mind around how overblown this is.
Now, Marshall believes that is true. Others are unsure, but the concern is palpable. GOP Congressman Will Hurd says Putin is manipulating Trump, and he asks, what should we do? Of course, the week of walkbacks.
I want to look at that one too.
Yeah, me too. I didn't even see what this guy said.
They only leave it on the screen long enough so nobody can read it unless they stop it.
Trump treasonous traitor. Oh yeah, that's what, like, George Will came up with some insane headline. Is it lose on purpose for the GOP or what? Why are they all piling on Trump? Why are they fomenting schism in the own party? Okay, it says, over the course of my career as an undercover officer in the CIA, I saw Russian intelligence manipulate many people. I never thought I would see the day when an American president would be one of them.
Now let's go back and see what Stelter said.
GOP Congressman Will Hurd says Putin is manipulating Trump, and he asks, what should we do?
Where is any of that?
Well, it's the headline behind, but I can't tell if that headline was his quote or not.
He took some liberties with that quote, for sure.
Think so.
Of course, the week of walkbacks did not inspire any confidence. Frankly, too many members of the media kind of fell for Trump's cleanup act, his double negative excuse. But you can't clean up actions with mere words. Trump's actions are what have brought us to this place. Where critics like Obama's CIA Director John Brennan are accusing him of treasonous behavior. Now, it's been almost a week since the Trump-Putin meeting, but it's still shrouded in secrecy. Trump didn't even debrief key officials in his own administration. He has not debriefed key allies on Capitol Hill either. So we've seen some concerned officials and lawmakers trying to sound the alarm, some by speaking out on the record, others by leaking to journalists. So it's worth noting what Trump did in reaction, what he did in reaction to all the coverage. Well, according to the Washington Post, he reacted furiously, and we could see some of that on Twitter. Trump lambasted the fake news media, saying it was going crazy on Thursday. That same day, he told John Bolton to invite Putin to Washington.
What did that say? Go back. Okay, this is Donald Trump's tweet. It says, the fake news media is going crazy. They make up stories without any backup, sources, or proof.
Which is exactly what Stelter's doing right now.
Many of the stories. Yeah, because he's like, it's his actions. So I'm like, what were his actions? He's just a mouth like every other politician.
And then he cites John Brennan, who, whether you like it or not, did vote for a communist candidate in the...
did he? And whatever. There's a lot of stories about him. Many of the stories written about me and the good people surrounding me are total fiction. Problem is, when you complain, you just give them more publicity, but I'll complain anyway. So he did not read any of that.
No, because only the highlighted part is important.
Right. I still want to know what his actions were.
So now people much smarter than me are asking, why is Trump trying to bring Putin to D.C. when his own director of national intelligence says it's undeniable Russia's trying to wreak havoc over the election process? The warning signs, the sirens are going off all over the place. And you can see journalists have been trying to trace the connections, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on.
When he says the warning signs, this is when this graphic of Donald Trump and all these faces linking in this little web to Vladimir Putin comes up. Like, this is the essence of a conspiracy theorist right here. This little bullshit graph they have on the screen.
Yeah, not to mention, you could put anybody at that level of like net worth or political or whatever and draw lines. It's 6 degrees of separation from anyone to anyone.
Look at this,
and the bubbles are ridiculous. Russian business interests.
I know.
Yes.
They flash
that's
this.
Everybody in the world who's Russian. Any international business is going to have a Russian footprint.
I mean, just take a look at this. They flash this on the screen just for a couple of seconds. You have no idea who these people are. You have no idea, unless you stop it. You don't know what these say in the middle here. And all you see is Trump, a big picture of Trump, a big picture of Putin. And then a bunch of lines drawn to it. And like to the audience, it's like, well, there it is. There's all the connections. And what he's saying right now is that the journalists are trying to uncover this truth. And he asked an important question here towards the end of it. And then
hold on. But I have to say, the only face I recognize besides Putin and Trump in this whole thing is Jeff Sessions. And it's a line to Sergei Kislyak, which I guess was like an ambassador to Russia, who Jeff Sessions shook the hand of at the RNC. Like, that was the big thing. Jeff Sessions laughs about it. It's like that guy, like a Russian ambassador in a international setting or whatever it was. Maybe it wasn't even the RNC. But that's the connection. He shook that guy's hand once in an official U.S. capacity. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know the only line I recognize, I know is BS. Now, Trump might be in bed with all these people and Manafort and all those guys, just like Hillary probably was, or the Podestas were or whatever. But they're not really getting to any of that.
You cut out there.
Sorry, I think they never really, it's just like Operation Fast and Furious. They don't really want to they don't want to open the can of worms because everybody's in it. When Mueller brought uranium to Putin or to Russia for Hillary, as per what you pointed out, it's very clear this kind of stuff isn't some smoking gun against Trump and collusion. It might be of Hillary and collusion.
Oh, absolutely. All right, I'm going to get out of this because this thing is killing our connection here.
I see.
But here's the end of that little opening monologue.
And you can see journalists have been trying to trace the connections, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. But that's really difficult. I mean, at the heart of this, the story is really a mystery. So our reporter's covering it responsibly. How should we get to the bottom of it?
It's not a mystery, it's a fabrication.
Right.
That's why it's so hard to get to the bottom of it.
The question that he asked was, how should we get to the bottom of it? He's not asking, how should we get to the bottom of whether or not Trump colluded with Russia? That's not what he's asking. He's asking, how can we get to the bottom of how we can convince the public that Trump colluded with Russia? So he's not asking about determining whether or not it's true.
Is that, are you?
No, I'm telling you what he's implied.
Yeah.
Throughout that whole monologue, they have never questioned whether or not Trump is colluding. The assumption has been he is colluding. Yeah. Here are all the connections. We're just looking for the smoking gun proof that's going to convince the public that it's true. Yeah. That's what he's really asking.
Yeah. But why do people like Coates, who is Trump's, on Trump's team, feed the fire with that? And by the way, what Coates said had to have been totally scripted, and it's possible he is dumb as a box of rocks, because
who said?
Dan Coates, the intelligence something or other director, said, I was listening to it in real time on, I think, Fox, where he said, the Russians are trying to wreak havoc on whatever. And then I was like, oh, he meant wreak havoc. And then later, he says wreak havoc. Now, like I said, my son has Down syndrome. He uses the expression wreak havoc, my son. So you don't have to be hyper intelligent to know the expression wreak havoc. I have no idea why Coates doesn't get it, but if he doesn't even know what the expression is, I doubt it was his expression. And all I've heard since then on every newscast on this is our proof is that his guy said it. You know, that's the thing about this intelligence thing that got Trump into so much trouble, is that these guys are all saying the intelligence people said it, like Wolf says to Rand. Aren't you? Can you? Do you not profess loyalty to the intelligence? You know, it's like, no. It's like Putin said. Where's the evidence? Go to a court, lay out the evidence, let a judge decide, let the people decide. That's how you make a conclusion. And that's why you can't convince the public, because they're not giving us the evidence.
Well, it's an evil demon, so you don't need evidence when it's an evil demon.
That's true, because he plays a different game. He doesn't play by the rules, whatever that guy was saying.
Okay, so continuing to think about some of those 10 rules of propaganda, which we got a little bit of there. I'll, again, as a refresher.
Yep.
We do not want war. The opposite party alone is guilty of war. The enemy is the face of the devil. We defend a noble cause, not our own interest. The enemy systematically commits cruelties. Our mishaps are involuntary, which you hear that in the media all the time. Mm-hmm. It's always the other one intentionally lies. We only made a mistake. The enemy
and the scale is of theirs is much larger than ours.
Yeah. The enemy uses forbidden weapons. We suffer small losses. Theirs are enormous. Artists and intellectuals back our cause. Our cause is sacred, and all who doubt our propaganda are traitors.
That's genius.
This next clip is from a guy named Max Boot. And this guy, have you heard of this guy?
I don't know. It sounds familiar, but
Max Boot is my favorite new idiot on mainstream media. Max Boot is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a CNN Global Affair analyst. He's one of these guys who, like Comey and like Joe Scarborough, often say, I used to be a Republican. Now I'm ashamed of the Republican Party. So he gets put on these shows every night. Just to give you a little context about him, he recently claimed that Barack Obama's biggest scandal was wearing a tan suit and putting his feet on the desk in the White House.
Really? It wasn't 20,000 bombs a year on Syria?
Those were his biggest scandal. Okay, Stelter asked him in this clip, he asked him right after that little summary, what do you think about this, Max Boot?
You look at this week, what does it add up to in your mind?
Well, I think you delivered a very good summary, Brian. We are now at a point we are debating for the first time in a serious way whether the President of the United States is disloyal to America, whether the President of the United States is an agent of a foreign power. Now, to be sure, we have not had proof of that, but there is evidence of it. And you're seeing people, very serious people. I mean, this is the kind of accusation in the past was only made by fringe conspiracy theorists, John Birchers and so forth. Now you're seeing people who are very credible, very serious, like John Brennan, the former CIA director, Jim Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, Leon Panetta, former CIA director, a lot of people in a position to know. And especially, I think Brennan is especially significant because he was actually CIA director during the 2016 campaign, and he was on the receiving end of briefings from our European allies who intercepted communications between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Mm-hmm. And these people are saying that there is something fishy going on here, that Trump is being compromised, he's being blackmailed by Putin, because there is no other way to explain his behavior. And that, to me, seems like a very plausible supposition, even though we have to wait for Robert Mueller's investigation to conclude before we have any evidence or proof of it, if in fact the proof is forthcoming.
A couple of things, then I want to get your take. Did you notice at the end there, he said, we have no evidence, and then he changed it to no proof, because earlier in the comment, he said, there's definitely evidence of it. So he slipped up and admitted that there's actually not evidence of it towards the end of that statement there.
Right.
And that, to me, seems like a very plausible supposition, even though we have to wait for Robert Mueller's investigation to conclude before we have any evidence or proof of it, if in fact the proof is forthcoming.
He said he said that Clapper intercepted communications.
Right, that was my next point.
Yeah,
he was
where's
talking
that?
about Brennan.
Where's that? Brennan. Right.
Yes, he's talking about Brennan is in a position to know because he was the CIA head when Barack Obama was president, and our European friends intercepted communications between Trump and the Russians. Now, do you remember when Judge Napolitano made the comment after Trump made the comment that the GCHQ was probably responsible for what's going on, for the intelligence hacks and for the emails? And then Judge Napolitano came out on Fox News and he echoed a similar theme. And then he was gone for like a month. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? He got booted off of Fox News for a while for saying the outrageous statement that the British, the GCHQ, was responsible for a lot of the things the Russians.
I remember he took a shot at the British, but I can't remember anything.
Okay, well, it's absolutely true. The GCHQ, which is a intel organization in the UK, along with a bunch of other intel organizations from the Allies, intercepted communications between Trump and Russia. Now, mind you, back then, this is the time where Trump's saying that they were tapping my wires.
Yeah.
Obama was tapping my wires. Everybody's saying, you're crazy. How could you say the British did it? This is around the time the guy called me Charles Lindbergh on WSB. But when you look this up, it's all true. There's an article in like the Daily Beast that says the British were the first people to alert us to the Trump and Russia communicating with each other.
So do we get that? Or do we have those communications, or is it still just hearsay?
They didn't have any proof in the stuff that I read.
All right, because this guy just said, Max Boot just said, Brennan had communications that were intercepted between Russia and the Trump campaign. Have we ever seen that?
I have not found or seen them. Maybe those have been out there, and maybe they labeled them something differently back then. But if it were evidence, as he said,
we would see it. Yeah,
we would have seen it. Everybody.
What evidence is he saying? That IP addresses? Like, what do you think he's referring to?
I think he's full of it.
Well, he also echoes what Chris Cuomo said. Like, this is proof that Trump hates America.
Yeah, and that he is definitely in the pocket of a foreign power. Give me a break. And his credible sources that are saying this, he cites possibly 3 of the most uncredible sources, which are all intelligence agency heads.
Brennan and Clapper are known perjurers, and Panetta, I think he committed treason, basically, as evidenced by a hearing where Jeff Sessions grilled him on where did you get the authority to bomb Libya or whatever, and he said, well, I went to the UN. Sessions was like, you're supposed to come here.
Now here, Stelter, he reads Trump's tweet, and then he goes to Max Boot again. You know, you got to get Max Boot's take because he's from the Council on Foreign Relations. There's always a guy from the Council of Foreign Relations.
Mm-hmm.
Council on Foreign Relations, intel agent, and some random person, usually an idiot from the other side, makes up these panel discussions. Although they've stopped even bringing other perspectives on a lot of these things. They only have one perspective really now. But okay, so he asked Max Boot a specific question about Trump's tweet in this clip.
Let's show a President Trump tweet, whether this is propaganda or not. He says the press wants war. He said earlier in the week, the fake news media wants so badly to see a major confrontation with Russia, even a confrontation that could lead to war. Max Boot, do you want war with Russia?
You know, another example of Trump really feeding the Russian propaganda line, because this is exactly what Putin says. His propaganda line is either you have to appease Russia or there will be World War III. And Trump keeps repeating it. So even as he is denying collusion, he is actually colluding with Russia in plain sight.
Okay, he doesn't say no to begin with.
That's so upsetting. That whole thing was very upsetting.
Rules of propaganda. The other people want war, not us. And how many, we could make a list of things that they have done to antagonize war. One being that they're calling the person in power treason and a puppet of a foreign enemy. They're saying that we have been attacked. Chris Cuomo is calling it an act of war. A bunch of people are calling it an act of war. To say that the media isn't provoking war is just a lie. And he laughs at it.
Didn't the king have to abdicate for being a Nazi sympathizer? I mean, are they going for that? Are they trying to like start the war and say Trump was against the war, so he's got to go? I don't know.
I don't know.
But I can't, I don't know. I would really like some evidence that Putin is anywhere near saying something like Russian appeasement or war, because Putin has the absolute high moral ground, whether he believes it or not, whether he has any ideology or not, it doesn't matter. A fair and even playing field with objective rules of engagement in with economic, whatever, arm's length transactions is what would benefit him right now. He doesn't want appeasement. He just wants rule of law, because we're abusing that. The declining superpower or declining hegemon, whatever, tends to lose its economic power before it loses its military power. So it's always the one who wants the war is the declining superpower, and the emerging power wants economic liberty and no war. So it just doesn't even make sense that would be Putin's position. That's our position, or it just would even logically be our position.
Yeah. It's just, he didn't say no.
Yeah, right. He laughed.
Say no. How could I ever want war? That's And then
I'm not sure they do want war. They just want what they want, and they don't care if it's some people. Well, the CFR guy probably wants war, but I'm not sure every single person there wants war. They're just thinking they're playing small ball.
Sir Andrew Wood, who was responsible for getting the dossier here, who breaks up countries and laughs about it, clearly wants war, and is now commentating on some of these mainstream networks. He definitely.
And the CFR is part of the conspiracy that wants to, it's the sister founded by the Chatham House, Royal Institute for International Affairs. They're the ones who have a plan for Atlanticist global domination. So if that guy does want war, I think the CFR or the Carnegie Endowment 100 years ago plotted in advance to get us into World War I. They want, those people, I believe it's reasonable to say, do want war. I'm not sure even the big shots, even Chris Wallace and Chris Cuomo, I'm not sure they actively want war. They don't care. They're not trying to prevent it, but they just want to win whatever battle this is, or promote their own careers, or maybe appease whoever they know is the power behind the throne. I don't know.
Yeah. And he made the comment that Trump, by saying that they want war, which is pretty obvious, or they're provoking war, which is pretty obvious.
And what Trump said was absolutely true.
Simply by saying that, you're echoing Russia's propaganda line, and you're openly colluding with Russia by saying something that to any objective observer is blatantly obvious.
Right. That's the thing. I noticed that, like, with anything, if you just talk about objectively the flaws in an argument, I'll get calls calling me everything from a communist to a Nazi to a fascist. People will just, you get this label, even if you're just trying to identify a real inconsistency in the other person's position.
Right, because propaganda rule number 10, all who don't agree with our propaganda line are traitors.
Exactly. That's amazing. Yeah. And there's only two sides. That's how they pigeonhole you.
Yep. Okay. This one. Oh yeah. So, and if this one isn't evidence that he wants war, I don't know what is. He talks about how the media is doing in reporting on Trump and Russia. This is Max Boot again.
I think the media has been doing an outstanding job. I mean, look at what happened at that press conference in Helsinki on Monday, where it was questions from Reuters and the Associated Press that got Trump into massive hot water because he was invited to denounce Putin and he would not do it. And then that flabbergasting question, which was absolutely correct to ask, does Putin have something on Trump, which is not a question you could imagine being asked with any previous president. And the fact that Putin did not flatly deny it, he actually deflected rather than denied that he had blackmail material on Trump. And then he admitted that he favored Trump in the 2016 election, which right there destroyed one of the major Trump lies, which is that Putin actually wanted Hillary Clinton in there because she would supposedly be weaker. So I think the media has done an outstanding job and a very responsible job of covering this debate about treason and about compromising material and all the rest of it. But, you know, as Jill suggested, it's not going to convince the president's hardcore followers. I mean, it's just flabbergasting to see that something like 70% of Republicans approved of the humiliation in Helsinki. They are so deep in Trump's pocket, and Trump in turn seems to be so deep in Putin's pocket. This is just such a massive turnaround. I mean, I grew up in the 1980s when Republicans were denouncing useful idiots, people who wanted to cooperate with Russia. And now they're the useful idiots. They want to cooperate with Russia. For a former Republican like me, that's very dismaying.
That guy is so full of it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. What is he doing? What is Trump doing? Like, you know, what is he doing? That makes it crystal clear he's in his pocket.
He just
getting
strings together
kickbacks.
assertions with no evidence.
Yep. That's it. That's all we got. That's what we're getting nonstop. It's and people will, I'm telling you, people say to me all the time, you know, well, Trump, I mean, with Russia. And it's like, I'm telling you, intelligent, successful lawyers and people who are really smart. And they are overwhelmed by just the sheer avalanche.
The repetition, yeah.
Yeah.
This is my favorite clip right here.
And if I say I don't believe it, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know you were a Trump supporter. No, they're just like horrified that I'm a Trump supporter. I'm like, I'm not a Trump supporter. I just think it's stupid. It's just stupid. What are you talking about? What'd he do? What did he do? And what is the problem? And why can't we talk about the Sixth Amendment for a minute?
It's like to get accepted to any group today, you're going to be tied up and forced to desecrate a picture of Trump before they will associate with you.
Fly the baby balloon.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to fly the Trump baby balloon. Otherwise, you're not
pass it around. Everybody has to hold it for a minute.
Yeah. That's how you show you're not a Nazi traitor these days. Here is Brian Stelter. I'll just let you hear this clip.
When Trump publicly sided with Putin on Monday, the press didn't blink. Anchors and experts called out the concerning behavior.
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president. This was nothing short of treasonous because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and it needs to stop.
We are living in a national emergency.
That was the consensus view.
That was the consensus view?
All people who work for his network?
Yeah, everybody thought that.
Wasn't it like Wolf and Cooper Anderson Cooper and stuff? Like the people who work at CNN?
That is how you try. That's how you attempt to convince the public that reality is completely flipped, that everybody believes something extreme when only a small number of people do it.
Yep.
And he goes on, which it's shocking to me that he even included the poll that I guess he was referencing after this. He goes, a recent CBS poll, which I presume is the evidence he's using to support the claim that everybody believes that Putin is basically in power in the United States and we're all in danger. Here's the poll that he uses to show that that is the consensus view.
Brand new today, a Washington Post ABC News poll finding that overall only 33% of Americans approved of Trump's handling of the Putin meeting. But if you break that down by party,
I forgot you can't see the screen. It says only 33% of Americans approved of the meeting, and then it says 50% disapproved. That's it. 33% approved, 50% disapproved.
Yeah.
You'll see 66% of Republicans approved of his performance.
So yeah, 50% of people disapproving is equal to its consensus that everybody thinks that Trump committed treason.
I can't believe 50% disapprove. That is 100% a function of propaganda. If you watched that press conference, there was nothing wrong with it.
Right. And he probably asked, you're right, he probably asked the interns around there, and the 33% that disagreed with him got fired. That day, sure.
And then tomorrow's poll is going to look a lot better.
Yeah, we did an internal poll of interns.
And now 100% of the people are disappointed.
Okay. Might have one. Oh, I pulled this one because you actually said this on Saturday when we were talking on the phone after the show. This is David Zurowick, a media critic from the Baltimore Sun. They're talking about, see, Trump did an interview with ABC, a guy named Jeff Glor, and they're talking about how Jeff Glor didn't go after Trump as hard as they would have liked to have seen him go after him. And this is his response. This is who he would like to see interview Trump.
With Trump, you really do need to press harder. I smile because I've criticized Chris Cuomo sometimes, and when he was on the morning show, when he'd really go at somebody, I think that's almost the way you have to interview Trump. I'm going back. This isn't an apology to Chris because I've written about it.
I'd love for Cuomo or anyone on CNN to get an interview with Trump.
Didn't you say you'd like to see Chris Cuomo interview him the other day?
I thought, I can't remember now. There was a little back and forth about Putin. I thought it was Putin.
Oh, Putin. Yeah, you said Putin interview Putin. Yeah. That's right.
I just feel because Cuomo does not have the horsepower.
He's like a brick. Yeah, but him and Trump would be like smashing bricks together.
Anchorman, the guy's name is Brick. So we should call Chris Cuomo.
Okay, so you mentioned this guy earlier. I just didn't recognize his name. This is the Intel head, and I'll play the clip.
Coates.
I think so, yeah. And then I'll tell you what I noticed.
Does President Trump know that the Russians are still actively interfering in U.S. politics? Does he believe that? It's an open question. And his silence on the matter speaks volumes. His own director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, has been really clear on this point. Watch what he said on Thursday.
It's undeniable that the Russians are taking the lead on this. Basically, they are the ones that are trying to undermine our basic values, divide us with our allies. They are the ones that are trying to wreak havoc over our election process. We need to call them out.
Okay, you hear that a lot. They're attempting to undermine our values and divide us from our allies. But nobody ever actually says what specific values they're talking about. They just say that very generally. I'll tell you what specific values they're talking about. They're talking about the values of the liberal international order, which you can get from the Chatham House reports that talk about that. And it's now emerging in a lot of mainstream news articles from like the Washington Post and the New York Times. This term liberal international order is becoming more mainstream. Those are the values they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Now, and he was at the Aspen. Was he at the Aspen Institute? That is a real, like, CFR type organization.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I know he was in Aspen, but if it was the Aspen Institute, that is like a very shady, not shady, but it's like I hear that and flags go off all over the place.
Another thing that was in a bunch of those clips, and again in that one that we can probably wrap it up on, is Stelter again said, does President Trump know that our elections are being attacked right now? We're under attack. We are, he's not provoking war. We are currently under attack. That's not a provocation. I don't know what is, but this theme that it is inevitable that the 2018 midterm elections are going to be hacked and meddled with by Russia is being blasted in our face every single night from the media. Now, I'm starting to believe anyway, that the reason they're doing this is because they don't think that a blue wave is going to happen.
Right.
And if a blue wave doesn't happen, then they can go ahead and convince people that the reason it didn't happen because, the consensus view is that Trump committed treason. So it's not possible that a blue wave could not happen unless Putin meddled with our elections. That's the only way. So by doing that, if you follow the way that communist propaganda works historically, is what this does is it doesn't release the tension, They need people to continue to be angry. I think the midterm elections isn't the end of this wave. I think it's the beginning. I think if there is not a blue wave, then that is going to set some people off and completely radicalize them into hardcore militant communists who are willing to do some serious criminal activity on behalf of removing Trump. And they might balance it a little. Might not be like a complete blow away. They might win some, but not enough to call it a blue wave, so that they have enough. They continue to sustain the outrage for another couple of years, and they also harden a few of the more radical people that they've created.
And I will say, they are shutting down every avenue of the internet, and short of actually cleaning up election integrity by holding people to a higher standard. I mean, I think Kemp won over Cagle today, and that guy has not been held accountable for what might have happened in Georgia in the 2016 election, which we'll never know. And so what are they saying? If Russia is still doing this, what is their avenue? Haven't we cracked down from top to bottom? Where is it coming from? What form is it taking?
Yeah.
And do they have to crack down even more? Do we have a complete, federalize all elections, have it all under the Ministry of Elections, and only have state news and all that? I mean,
That's
what are
what I'm
they
curious
going
about.
for?
When they say that, are they talking about actually hacking the machines, which did not happen last time, according to them? The meddling was simply fake news, or actually releasing facts that did not favor the candidate they wanted to favor.
And look at what these people are doing. All this stuff, there aren't facts. It's just nonstop, contentless propaganda to influence your vote. I mean, to really drown out any possibility of you finding out the truth. I mean, it's really crazy what they're doing, and that anything Russia could do couldn't have a fraction of the impact that this faction in the US is doing.
Yeah, and all this stuff that we just heard came from a show that says that its purpose is to tell us how the news really gets made and to analyze the media. That's a media analysis right there?
Right.
I mean, that was simply propagating one point of view the entire time.
And it does bother me that it's the same thing, all this stuff, like what did happen to the left, in that they, unlike me, they champion democracy for democracy's sake, but they really don't believe in it because they're trying to undermine it. If we all agreed on a path they did not like, they feel like, as Kissinger would say, it's too important to be left to the people,
Yes.
which may be true. I mean, I certainly don't think objective rights should be vulnerable to mob rule, but these guys seem to think so.
Yeah.
So what do they want? They want a dictatorship according to their, like, not even ideological grounds. They want a dictatorship, and they have nothing to say. They're not saying, I want a dictatorship for the people. I want labor. I want to end war. They don't even say what they want the dictatorship of.
They don't even know what they want. They just,
there's
a few of them that might know what they want.
They just want to get power in the hands of their champions or sponsors.
Exactly. I agree. Totally agree with that. And here's one more headline to close on. We can get out of here. This was recently in the Washington Post, and they cite George Lakoff. We've talked about him a lot. He's the cognitive linguist who creates a lot of the talking points, and he's a frame specialist, how to frame the argument and which words to say. And then he says the words to say, and then everybody in the media, all the celebrities that follow him, and they start saying all the things that he tells them to say, and then your friends start saying all the things that Lakoff tells them to say, and then they say stuff like facts don't matter, so I don't use facts, which somebody I know said recently, and it's something that Lakoff said, and then it kind of it drives you mad. So he's an influential guy. But here's the headline from the Washington Post: How to write headlines in the Trump era. And they give us a formula. I recommend the following format for headlines. Quote, Trump falsely claims Muslims celebrated 9/11, end quote. Or, quote, Trump falsely claims he did not mock disabled reporter, end quote. The key word is falsely, the essence of the story. The reporter should never cite a claim which suggests some measure of plausibility without adding falsely.
What? What are you're reading this from the Washington Post?
Yes, this is in the Washington Post. This is how they're saying to write headlines. Always
this is
call
crazy.
Trump claims falsely. Yes.
They literally write down the propaganda. And you know what the problem is? People do not realize that the right does it also, whatever their agenda. So people think, well, of course it's the left. That's how they get away with it, is that people on the left defend their side and people on the right think their side doesn't do it. That's why the dialectic marches on.
Exactly. They think they do the same thing as, what was the rule? It was like rule number 8, where the enemy is always evil and our mistakes are always a mistake. That's not exactly how it was worded, but that's what it is. People,
our missteps are mistakes. Theirs are evil.
Yes. People project evil on other people's. Yeah.
That's a great list. That's really genius.
It is. It really is a great list. And that book also, Falsehoods in Wartime, is a very good book. It's like, you can actually download it online for free if you want. It's only like 100 pages. But that's all I got for today. Do you have anything else you want to go into?
No, I'm still waking up thinking of all the stuff Putin said that there was hidden meaning in that. So, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
but I literally could do a 24/7 news cycle on all the stuff Putin actually said. Like there were so many threads to pull. Chris Wallace threw out these 3 people Putin allegedly murdered. I mean, you could do a week's show on every single fact or item mentioned in that 30-minute interview. Honestly.
That interview, as well as the questions that were asked during the press conference, is the perfect example of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, of a person coming into a conversation with no intent of actually having a constructive dialogue. The only intent is to win or to kind of get or shout down the person they're talking to, because within all of those questions were accusations.
Yeah. It was all about, the questions were the propaganda, just like Common Core.
Yeah.
It's like, let's have a conversation. Let's take a test. And the question, I mean, my kids literally say, I learned so much from the questions. It's like, no, you don't.
They were completely unaffected by the answer. It affected them none. They didn't listen to it. Their whole point was to get the question out.
Yes. The purpose is to exploit the audience that tuned in to hear what your guy had to say and give your questions. But so my point is just that all this stuff, all this propaganda was the media abdicating its constitutional, I would go so far as to say, responsibility, really, of a free press, instead of shouting down the free press and working to suppress it and telling people how to call in my show and disrupt it. We could actually be talking about policy. We could talk about the actual things that you think Trump is doing. I don't even care what happened. I don't care. Like, I don't even think it's super important to talk about what happened during the election. Let's talk about the specific things you think Trump is doing to benefit Russia, and then how that hurts us, because it would benefit Russia to trade freely with Russia, and it would benefit us. So it wouldn't really benefit probably liquefied natural gas exporters, but they're not us. That's not what our government is, right? Supposedly. So I'm just saying, let's actually, I mean, all that noise, anytime you tune into the media, it's just noise, and it's never about a policy debate. And so when your friend has somebody yelling in his face, you really, the Socratic method should drill down to, do you want what's best for your children's future, for this country, for, you know what I mean? Let's talk about that and what that means and why you think that.
Yeah.
Because that's the ultimate question.
Yeah, I agree. One of the people we know truly believes that Nazis are going to potentially threaten him and his family.
I'll tell you, there is a dialectic being manufactured from the top that could result in that, because that's where Nazis came from.
Yes, if they continue to do it, it will manifest reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's the dialectic, it's the extreme on both sides that makes it feeds, you know what I mean? That's what feeds it, and that's where you get and the point of it was to destroy the country. The hate destroyed the host, as it always does. And a lot of innocent people got hurt, millions upon millions, inside Germany, inside England, inside the US. everybody, well, I mean, U.S. people went outside. Hawaii was not actually part of the U.S. at the time, although I guess the base was. But I'm just saying the hate that everybody hating the Nazis, like you say, the Antifa, is the thing that will escalate, will feed any seminal Nazi movement anyway.
Yeah, it's a spiral of silence effect. It's by constantly acting like there's a bunch of Nazis overrunning America or communists overrunning America in the news media. And by heightening and exaggerating this fear of that, kind of like Stelter saying that this is the consensus view, by representing these radical views as the normal consensus, then that makes people who are rational and reasonable, like 99% of people are more towards the middle. And that makes those people start to believe that this actually, this false reality they're presenting, they start to believe that it's true. And as a result, they start to remain silent because they believe they're going to be socially shamed by not going along with this narrative that they're hearing. And when that happens, when more and more reasonable people become silent for fear of shame, some of them start to even jump on the bandwagon of extremism, which is what we're seeing. I know I've seen this with some people I know. They've started to go along with some of these radical things. They've gone from a reasonable person to a radical person.
They don't have to know. So take this Charlotte. Was it Charlotte, where it was like they were marching for,
which they compared Trump's meeting with Putin to Charlottesville.
Yeah. So for him to say they were good or bad people on both sides, whatever. So you have the people who got the license to march, who may or may not have been super radical. I really don't know. But I'm sure there were people there, probably the people who got the permit, who had a very narrowly defined purpose that was reasonable, right? Let's just say that was a scenario. I really don't know. I didn't look into it, but they're a narrowly defined purpose that was reasonable. So then you take the Antifa, so they're a bunch of Nazis. Then you have a regular guy saying, oh, they weren't a bunch of Nazis. If you read what they were actually saying, they weren't Nazis. Then the Antifa says, you're a Nazi. So then that guy says, wow, I didn't realize what complete a-holes you were. I'm going to go march now, and then they start radicalizing them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So then you've got this, the more extreme you get, the more polarizing it is. And then you have this destructive spiral, because what you're actually doing is bringing out the worst in people and supplanting analysis and civil discourse with this, emotionalism, which is why when you have that, I wish I could remember that guy's name, the Panamanian guy who's like, the system isn't working. That's why we have to march on a highway and stop traffic. Yeah. So then you just degenerate to where there is no civility. And then because in a civilly functioning society, you don't get to that point where people are all emotional and hateful and polarized and polarizing. You don't get to that point. That's what all these mechanisms, and our system's great because it recognizes the minority by having the Senate and the Congress and the Electoral College and all that kind of stuff. So nobody has to get absolutely frustrated beyond their minds, move to another state, whatever. But maybe that's why, maybe this is an insight. That's why this stuff is going hand in hand with neutralizing, diminishing, making it impossible to work through the civil systems that are there. Like there's numerous examples, like the Me Too stuff. There are systems in place for you to get justice already. Like just prove your point or whatever. I mean, I had guys say, absolutely, people I work for, one guy in particular saying just awful things on my voicemail, threatening me like, oh, I know you're there, not picking up. What are you afraid of me? Well, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what? Jeez. So you can totally, and this was before cell phones. It was an answering machine with a tape. I'm just saying that people were getting huge settlements for stuff like that. And in my experience, it stopped after a big settlement at Baker Botts or whatever it was. Baker McKenzie, I can't remember. So I'm just saying, you have to create that polarizing thing and also neutralize the civilization. And this is coming down from the top. People like Lakoff, people like these media folks. I mean, it's really, it's terribly irresponsible. And really, I would say at a certain point, it's going to get a lot of people killed. I mean, like the way anti-Semitism and war do. You know what I mean? You get the people to kill each other internally, and then you get at the same time, like if you really look at what happened in Germany, they were killing each other internally, and then and at the same time, like I don't know what the connection is between the domestic strife. Maybe it's just a divided population can't defend its own interests.
Divide and conquer is how.
Yeah, and the Jews were actually very. I have a good friend who's a German Jew, and he said at the time, the Jews in Germany were the least marginalized. They were the most German. They were the most loyal to the country. Whatever, they could have provided a united front for Germany. So maybe neutralizing them was a part of destroying Germany. You know what I mean? So I don't know, but there's definitely a connection between causing problems internally and leading people into a war that would further destroy the country. Maybe just taking the eye off the ball or making people bloodthirsty.
Another aspect of how they are radicalizing people is that only extreme radical behavior gets rewarded. I mentioned this last week, the indivisible groups. If you go out and you lay down on the highway, or you go out and you shout down a congressperson at a town hall, you get rewarded in the email system and on the website of these indivisible groups. So that gives incentives. It gives people the dopamine release. If you're insecure and you're somebody because you're throwing a rock through somebody's window, it's going to encourage other people to do it. And the stuff that you see on the mainstream media, these extreme, if you want to get noticed, if you want people to pay attention to you and see your face everywhere, then you do or say something extreme, and CNN might interview you. So the radical behavior is what gets rewarded.
Interesting. Yeah. That goes to why I don't ever like to talk about terrorist attacks or mass shootings or anything like that. I don't know what's really going on behind the scenes, but if it's real, I don't want to encourage it. If you're ever going to like black something out for national security, it should be all mass casualty events or all lone wolf attacks. Like you should never just pretend it did not happen so that they get no positive feedback whatsoever.
Yeah. And even just at the conversational level, if I'm somebody who wants to go have a dialogue with somebody and we end up having a conversation that's productive, not very dramatic, but it's reasonable and understanding, nobody in the media is going to break a story about it. But if I go in there and I punch somebody in the face that has a MAGA hat on or something, and then I start shouting "you're a Nazi" at them, then that story's going to make the news.
Yeah.
And the culture, you talked about it with Instagram. This is, we always have this attention. We all want attention and stuff, but with the way that technology works now, we can get attention at a mass level if you do certain things. And when people see this stuff, they know, okay, if I do something crazy, maybe I can get some attention. And the more that this propagates, it has an effect of radicalization on people who it's not just, it might be an act for some people. For others, the act turns real.
Well, plus they're being primed for it.
Right.
From video games to rewritten history in schools.
Yeah.
To even unemployment and drug use and stuff. This is not a society that's being trained to be civically responsible or level-headed.
Yeah, we're all crazy.
I mean, I'm not. I'm not. I drink water with fluoride in it, and who knows if aluminum particles are raining down on my head, but I can think, so it's possible.
Of course it's possible. That's why we have to continue it goes cycles through history, even though technology's never been like this, but it's been cycles through history that have been similar. It's a matter of continuing to fight for reason, like to fight for, what would Spock do?
I love that. That'll be what would Spock do? WWSD. I'm there. That'll be my new mantra. Let's leave on that note. That's our new mantra. What would Spock do? WWSD.
Thank you for listening. Thank you, everybody who's donated to the show. And if you want to donate, you want to help us out in any way, go to propagandareportdaily.com, click on the PayPal icon or the Patreon icon, subscribe to the podcast, click on the little apple to subscribe. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Monica, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Binkley. Later.